Welcome to Some TV Movie Channel, your home for amazing movies and non-stop entertainment. Get ready to enjoy blockbuster hits, timeless classics, and exciting stories from every genre. Whether you love action, drama, comedy, or adventure, there's always something to watch here. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the latest uploads. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the movie experience with Some TV Movie Channel. Raiders of the Lost Ark is a 1981 American action-adventure film directed by Steven Spielberg and written by Lawrence Kasdan, based on the story created by George Lucas and Philip Kaufman. Set in 1936, the film stars Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones, a fearless archaeologist who travels the world in search of priceless historical treasures. This time, he finds himself in a dangerous race against Nazi Germany to recover the legendary Ark of the Covenant, a sacred artifact believed to possess the power to make any army invincible. Jones is joined by his strong-willed former love interest, Marion Ravenwood, Karen Allen, as they attempt to stop rival archaeologist Renee Tilda Copyright Belloc, Paul Freeman, who is helping the Nazis locate the Ark and unlock its incredible power. George Lucas first came up with the idea for Raiders of the Lost Ark in the early 1970s. Inspired by classic adventure serials from the early 20th century, he worked with Philip Kaufman to develop the story, with Kaufman suggesting the Ark of the Covenant as the film's central treasure. Lucas later shifted his focus to developing Star Wars, released in 1977. Before returning to the Indiana Jones project that same year. After sharing the concept with Steven Spielberg, the director quickly joined the production. Although Lucas and Spielberg had already planned many of the film's major action scenes and stunts, they brought in Lawrence Kasdan to connect those ideas into a complete screenplay. Principal photography began in June 1980 with a production budget of $20 million and wrapped up in September of the same year. Filming took place at Elstree Studios in England, along with location shoots in La Rochelle, France, Tunisia, and Hawaii. Before its release on June 12, 1981, audience surveys suggested there was little excitement for the film, especially when compared to Superman 2. Despite those expectations, Raiders of the Lost Ark became the highest-grossing film of the year, earning approximately $354 million worldwide and remaining in some theaters for more than a year. The movie also received widespread critical acclaim for its thrilling action sequences, memorable set pieces, humor, and exciting storytelling. It earned numerous awards and honors, including 5 Academy Awards, 7 Saturn Awards, and 1 BAFTA. Today, Raiders of the Lost Ark is widely regarded as one of the greatest adventure films ever made. Its influence on popular culture has been enormous, inspiring countless filmmakers and leading to many imitations across films, television, comics, and video games. In 1999, the United States Library of Congress selected the film for preservation in the National Film Registry due to its cultural, historical, and artistic significance. The film launched the highly successful Indiana Jones franchise, which later expanded with 4 sequels, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, 1984, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, 1989, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, 2008, and Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, 2023. The franchise also includes a television series, video games, comic books, novels, theme park attractions, and a wide range of merchandise. The story begins in 1936. When American archaeologist Indiana Jones ventures into a booby-trapped temple in Peru to recover a valuable golden idol. Just as he escapes the deadly traps, his longtime rival, archaeologist Renee Tilda Copyright Belloc, confronts him, steals the idol, and leaves Jones to flee aboard a waiting float plane. After returning to the United States, Jones is approached by 2 Army intelligence agents who reveal that Nazi forces are conducting excavations in Tanis, Egypt. One of the intercepted Nazi telegrams mentions Jones's former mentor, Abner Ravenwood. Jones quickly realizes that the Nazis are searching for the legendary Ark of the Covenant, which Adolf Hitler believed will make his army unstoppable. The agents recruit Jones to find the Ark before the Nazis can claim its extraordinary power. Jones travels to Nepal, where he reunites with Abner's daughter, Marion Ravenwood, with whom he once shared a complicated and controversial romantic relationship. He also learns that Abner has passed away. Their reunion takes place in Marion's bar, where their search for the Ark is about to take a dangerous turn. During a confrontation with Gestapo agent Arnold Todt, the bar is set on fire as he attempts to seize a mysterious medallion from Marion. When Todt tries to retrieve the medallion from the flames, he badly burns his hand, leaving the medallion's design permanently branded into his palm. Jones and Marion manage to escape with the artifact. Their journey takes them to Cairo, where they reunite with Jones's trusted friend, Salah. He reveals that Belloc is working alongside the Nazis, who have created an incomplete replica of the medallion using the image burned into Todd's hand. Soon after, Nazi soldiers and hired mercenaries attack. During the chaos, Marion appears to be killed, leaving Jones devastated. An imam later deciphers the medallion, revealing its true significance. One side contains a warning against disturbing the Ark of the Covenant, while the other side, unknown to the Nazis, includes the correct measurements for the Staff of Ra. When used together, the medallion and the properly sized staff reveal the Ark's exact location. Realizing the Nazis are excavating the wrong site, Jones and Salah secretly infiltrate the dig. Using the medallion and the correctly measured Staff of Ra, they locate the Well of Souls, the Ark's hidden resting place. They successfully recover the Ark, an ornate golden chest of immense historical and religious importance. However, Belloc and the Nazis soon discover them and seize the artifact. Jones and Marion, who has actually survived and been held captive by Belloc, are trapped inside the Well of Souls. They eventually escape, and Jones courageously hijacks a truck transporting the Ark, reclaiming it from the Nazis. Together, Jones and Marion arrange to ship the Ark to London aboard the steamer Bantu Wind. Their journey is interrupted when a German U-boat intercepts the ship, capturing both Marion and the Arkansas. Determined to rescue them, Jones secretly boards the submarine. The U-boat travels to a remote island in the Aegean Sea, where Belloc plans to test the Ark's supernatural power before presenting it to Adolf Hitler. Jones launches a surprise attack and threatens to destroy the Ark, but ultimately surrenders after Belloc correctly realizes that Jones would never destroy such an irreplaceable historical treasure. Belloc also believes Jones is just as eager as he is to discover whether the Ark's legendary power is real. The Nazis tie up Jones and Marion as Belloc performs a ceremonial opening of the Arkansas. At first, it appears to contain nothing but sand. Moments later, however, powerful spirits, flames, and bolts of supernatural energy erupt from within. Following Jones's warning, he and Marion keep their eyes tightly shut, avoiding the Ark's deadly power. The unleashed forces kill Belloc, Todd, and the assembled Nazi soldiers before the Ark mysteriously seals itself once again. When Jones and Marion finally open their eyes, the area is completely silent. The Nazis have vanished, and their restraints have mysteriously fallen away. Back in Washington, D.C., the United States government rewards Jones for successfully recovering the Arkansas. However, despite his repeated questions, government officials reveal only that the artifact has been taken to a secret location, where it will be examined by top men. In the film's memorable final scene, the Ark is packed into a wooden crate and stored inside an enormous government warehouse, surrounded by countless identical crates, leaving its ultimate fate unknown. Raiders of the Lost Ark also features Wolf Kaller as Nazi officer Colonel Dietrich and Anthony Higgins as Major Gobler, Dietrich's loyal second-in-command. Don Fellows and William Hootkins portray U.S. Army intelligence officers Colonel Musgrove and Major Eaton, while George Harris plays Simon Katanga, the captain of the Bantu Wind. Fred Sorensen appears as Jones's pilot, Jock, and producer Frank Marshall makes a cameo as the pilot of the Flying Wing aircraft. Pat Roach takes on two roles, portraying the imposing Nazi who battles Jones near the Flying Wing and one of Todd's Nepalese Sherpas. Vic Tablian also appears in dual roles as Jones's untrustworthy Peruvian guide, Barranca, and the Monkey Man in Cairo. Alfred Molina makes his film debut as Satipo, the guide who betrays Jones during the movie's unforgettable opening sequence. Terry Richards played the skilled Cairo swordsman who is famously shot by Indiana Jones during one of the film's most memorable scenes. George Lucas first came up with the idea for Raiders of the Lost Ark in 1973, shortly after completing the comedy drama American Graffiti, 1973. The inspiration came when he saw an old movie poster featuring a heroic figure leaping from a horse onto a moving truck. It reminded him of the exciting film serials he had loved as a child, including Buck Rogers, 1939, Zorro's Fighting Legion, 1939, Spy Smasher, 1942, and Don Winslow of the Navy, 1942. Lucas wanted to create a modern B-movie inspired by those classic adventure serials. He developed the concept of a fearless archaeologist named Indiana Smith, whose name was inspired by his own Alaskan Malamute dog. Around the same time, Lucas was also attempting to secure the rights to adapt the classic space opera serial Flash Gordon, 1936. When that effort failed, he temporarily put the Indiana Smith project aside and focused on creating his own original space adventure, Star Wars, 1977. In 1975, Lucas shared his serial adventure concept with his friend Philip Kaufman, and the two spent about 2 weeks developing the story. Lucas envisioned Indiana Smith as both a college professor and a daring archaeologist, drawing inspiration from his fascination with archaeology and renowned explorers such as Hiram Bingham III, Roy Chapman Andrews, and Leonard Worley. Kaufman made several important contributions to the story. He removed Lucas's original idea of Smith being a nightclub regular and womanizer, and instead suggested making the Ark of the Covenant the central objective of the film. His idea was influenced by hematologist Raphael Isaac's theories about the scientific explanation of biblical miracles. The Ark also created a compelling conflict between Indiana Jones and the Nazis, reflecting Adolf Hitler's well-known fascination with the occult. Lucas originally wanted Kaufman to direct the film, but Kaufman was already committed to the outlaw Josie Wales, 1976. As a result, Lucas once again put the project on hold and returned to working on Star Wars. In May 1977, after Star Wars premiered, Lucas traveled to Hawaii to avoid what he feared would be disappointing box office news. He invited Steven Spielberg and his wife to join him on the vacation. While relaxing on a beach near the Mauna Kea Beach Hotel, Lucas and Spielberg discussed their future projects. Spielberg revealed that he wanted to direct a James Bond film, but Lucas instead pitched his idea for the adventures of Indiana Smith. Although Lucas still hoped Kaufman would direct the project, it soon became clear that he was unavailable. Lucas then offered the directing role to Spielberg, who accepted. Spielberg's recent discovery, Lawrence Kasdan, was hired to write the screenplay. Although Kasdan had been a professional screenwriter for only about a month, Lucas was impressed after reading his script for Continental Divide, 1981. And decided he was the right choice. In January 1978, Lucas, Spielberg, and Kasdan gathered at the home of Lucas's assistant in Sherman Oaks, Los Angeles. Over the course of 3 to 5 days, they spent nearly 9 hours each day expanding Lucas's story outline. Many of the film's most iconic moments were born during these brainstorming sessions, including the giant rolling boulder trap, the monkey in Cairo, Todd burning the medallion's imprint into his hand, and the government agents secretly locking the Ark away at the end of the film. Kasdan later observed that Lucas and Spielberg already had many spectacular action sequences in mind. His role was to connect those exciting moments into a cohesive and engaging story. One significant change involved the hero's name. Spielberg disliked Indiana Smith, believing audiences might associate it with Steve McQueen's character, Nevada Smith. The three filmmakers eventually agreed to rename the character Indiana Jones. The final version of Indiana Jones was inspired by actors Clint Eastwood and Toshiro Mifune, as well as the fictional spy James Bond. Lucas had originally imagined Jones as a skilled kung fu fighter and a charming playboy who financed his lifestyle with the treasures he recovered during his adventures. However, Spielberg and Kasdan felt the character was already compelling enough as a daring adventurer and respected archaeologist, so they simplified his personality to create the iconic hero audiences know today. Steven Spielberg suggested giving Indiana Jones a major personal flaw, such as being a compulsive gambler or an alcoholic, to make him more complex. However, George Lucas envisioned Jones as an honest, trustworthy role model whom audiences could admire. Even so, both filmmakers agreed that he should be far from perfect. They wanted him to be vulnerable, capable of making mistakes, and equally convincing in both serious and humorous situations. Their goal was to create a hero who felt relatable while still inspiring audiences. Lucas also proposed that Marion Ravenwood had shared a romantic relationship with the much older Jones when she was just 11 years old. Spielberg immediately objected, insisting she had better be older. While Spielberg was directing 1979, Lawrence Kasdan worked from Spielberg's office to write Raiders of the Lost Ark. He drew inspiration from early 20th century adventure serials as well as classic films such as Red River, 1948, Seven Samurai, 1954, and The Magnificent Seven, 1960. Kasdan envisioned Indiana Jones as an anti-hero and archaeologist whose work often resembled grave robbing rather than traditional academic research. Kasdan also believed the supporting characters should have distinct personalities and leave a lasting impression on the audience. He later explained that the greatest challenge in writing the screenplay was finding believable ways for Jones to survive one dangerous situation after another, while also explaining how he traveled between the story's many international locations. After roughly 5 months of writing, Kasdan completed the first draft in August 1978. Spielberg praised the screenplay but felt it was too long, so Kasdan and Lucas worked together to tighten and refine the script. The story originally spanned multiple countries, including the United States, Egypt, Greece, and Nepal. Several sequences were eventually removed, including a trip to Shanghai that featured a thrilling minecart chase and a scene in which Jones used a large gong as protection from gunfire. These ideas were later reworked for Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, 1984. Much to Kasdan's disappointment, a significant portion of the romantic subplot between Jones and Marion was cut, along with scenes that highlighted the mutual attraction between Marion and Belloc. The screenplay was finalized by December 1979. George Lucas initially hoped to finance Raiders of the Lost Ark himself, but he did not have the necessary funds. Lucasfilm then pitched the project to several major Hollywood studios, all of which turned it down. The estimated $20 million budget was one concern, but the proposed business arrangement was an even bigger obstacle. Lucas wanted the studio to provide the financing while giving up creative control, allowing him to retain the licensing rights and ownership of any future sequels. Most studios considered these terms unacceptable. Another reason for the hesitation was Spielberg's recent track record. He had gained a reputation for productions that ran over schedule and over budget, and his latest film, 1941, had exceeded its budget and received a disappointing critical response. Despite the setbacks, Lucas refused to move forward with the project unless Spielberg remained the director. When the proposal reached Paramount Pictures, company president Michael Eisner negotiated a compromise. He accepted Lucas's terms in exchange for exclusive rights to future sequels and included strict financial penalties if the production exceeded its schedule or budget. Reports on Lucas's compensation vary. Some sources claim he negotiated a salary ranging from $1 million to $4 million, along with a percentage of the film's gross profits, while others state that he received only a share of the net profits. Spielberg, meanwhile, earned up to $1.5 million for directing the film and also received a percentage of the gross profits. Producer Frank Marshall, who had previously worked on smaller independent films, was brought on board because Steven Spielberg believed he could keep the production on schedule and within budget. Spielberg also recruited cinematographer Douglas Slocum and production designer Norman Reynolds, both of whom he greatly admired for their earlier work. His longtime collaborator, Michael Kahn, returned as the film's editor. George Lucas served as the film's executive producer and also directed the second unit sequences. He enlisted his longtime associate Howard Kazanjian, believing his disciplined approach would help keep the filmmaker's ambitious ideas under control. Lucas also brought in trusted collaborator Robert Watts as associate producer and production manager. Paramount Pictures set an 85-day shooting schedule, but Lucas, Spielberg, and Marshall challenged themselves to complete filming in just 73 days. After facing criticism for previous productions that ran over schedule, Spielberg was determined to stay on time. Pre-production began in December 1979 and lasted 6 months. Although Spielberg normally preferred a full year of preparation, he accelerated the process to help keep costs under control. During this period, both Spielberg and Lucas were also juggling other projects. Storyboard artists Dave Negron, Michael Lloyd, and Joe Johnston, working at Veroz, created an extensive visual plan for the film. More than 80% of the screenplay was illustrated through approximately 6,000 storyboard images, allowing Spielberg to carefully visualize scenes and significantly reduce the time needed to set up shots during filming. The screenplay described the opening of the Ark simply as all hell breaks loose, leaving the artists with the challenge of imagining what that would look like. Each artist proposed different concepts involving spirits, flames, supernatural energy, and strange lighting effects. Joe Johnston was eventually assigned the task of blending their ideas into one cohesive sequence. Spielberg also commissioned detailed miniature models of the film's largest sets, including the Well of Souls, the Tannis dig site, and the Cairo marketplace. These models featured 1-inch tall figurines to estimate the number of extras required for each scene and to help plan camera angles and lighting. During pre-production, Spielberg abandoned an idea to give the villain Arnold Todd a mechanical arm equipped with interchangeable weapons such as a machine gun or flamethrower. Lucas felt the concept pushed the film into an entirely different genre. When it came to casting Indiana Jones, Lucas wanted a relatively unknown actor who would be willing to commit to a 3-film series. Many actors were considered for the role, including Bill Murray, Nick Nolte, Steve Martin, Chevy Chase, Tim Matheson, Nick Mancuso, Peter Coyote, Jack Nicholson, Jeff Bridges, John Shee, Sam Elliott, Harry Hamlin, and David Hasselhoff. Casting director Mike Fenton strongly favored Jeff Bridges, while Lucas's wife and frequent collaborator, Marcia Lucas, preferred Tom Selleck. Selleck, however, was contractually committed to filming the television series Magnum P.I. if it was picked up as a full series. Lucas and Spielberg even approached CBS, asking the network to release him from his contract 10 days early. By then, CBS recognized Selleck's growing popularity and officially approved Magnum P.I., forcing him to withdraw from Raiders of the Lost Ark just weeks before filming was set to begin. Ironically, the 1980 actors' strike later delayed production on the television series by 3 months, which would have given Selleck enough time to play Indiana Jones. Spielberg became convinced that Harrison Ford was the perfect choice after watching his performance in The Empire Strikes Back. Howard Kissinger later explained that Ford had always been considered, but Lucas initially hesitated because the actor was already widely recognized from Star Wars. Lucas also worried that casting Ford again would make it seem as though he relied too heavily on him, and he doubted Ford would commit to a 3-film contract. Ford, however, found the project exciting and accepted the offer. He negotiated a 7-figure salary, secured a percentage of the film's gross profits, and gained the option to revise some of his dialogue. To prepare for the demanding role, Ford followed an intensive fitness program and trained for several weeks with stunt coordinator Glenn Randall to master the use of a bullwhip. He became skilled enough to perform complex whip tricks, including disarming the Monkey Man, played by Vic Tablian. He also underwent rehabilitation for an old wrist injury to handle the physical demands of the role. Ford viewed Indiana Jones primarily as a scholar and archaeologist, with his adventurous side emerging only when circumstances demanded a tale perspective that became one of the defining qualities of the character. For the role of Jones's love interest, Marion, Steven Spielberg envisioned a heroine inspired by classic early 20th century Hollywood stars such as Irene Dunne, Barbara Stanwyck, and Aunt Sheridan as strong, confident women who could stand toe-to-toe with their male counterparts. George Lucas initially wanted Deborah Winger for the part, but she declined the role. Spielberg hoped to cast his girlfriend, Amy Irving, but she was unavailable. Other actresses considered included Stephanie Zimbalist, Barbara Hershey, Sean Younger, who even performed a screen test alongside Tom Selleck and Wendy Millick. Spielberg had been impressed by Karen Allen's performance as an independent and spirited character in Animal House, 1978, and her professionalism during the Raiders of the Lost Ark auditions further convinced him she was the right choice. One of the first questions Spielberg asked Allen was, "How well do you spit?" Allen also created an extensive backstory for Marion, imagining that her mother had died and that she had been involved with Jones when she was around 15 or 16 years old. Although Spielberg appreciated her creativity, he joked that it belonged in a different movie. Screenwriter Lawrence Kasdan named Marion after his grandmother-in-law, while the surname Ravenwood was inspired by a street in Los Angeles. The character of Belloc was designed as a refined and sophisticated villain to serve as a contrast to the rugged, beer-drinking hero. Spielberg cast Paul Freeman after watching his performance in the 1980 docudrama Death of a Princess. Freeman's striking, piercing eyes immediately caught Spielberg's attention. Giancarlo Giannini and French singer Jack Dutronc were also considered for the role. Danny DeVito was offered the role of Salah, who was originally imagined as a slim Egyptian man, about 5 feet 1½ inches tall, similar to the title character in Gunga Din, 1939. However, DeVito had to decline because of scheduling conflicts with his sitcom Taxi, and his agent's salary demands exceeded the production's budget. John Rhys Davis ultimately won the role after impressing Spielberg with his performance in the 1980 miniseries S.H.A. Ring Gun. Spielberg encouraged him to portray Salah as a blend of his S.H.A. Ring Gun character and the larger-than-life personality of John Falstaff. Ronald Lacey was cast as the sinister Gestapo agent Arnold Todt because Spielberg felt he strongly resembled actor Peter Lorre. The role had originally been offered to Klaus Kinski, but he turned it down in favor of the horror film Venom, 1981, which offered a higher salary. Principal photography began on June 23, 1980. Filming took place on location in La Rochelle, France, Tunisia in North Africa and Hawaii, while interior scenes were shot on elaborate sets at Elstree Studios in England. Elstree Studios was selected because it was home to many talented artists and technicians who had previously worked on Star Wars. Shooting on location cost approximately $100,000 per day, excluding crew salaries, while the construction of the film's sets added another $4 million to the budget. Because of financial constraints, the production could rent certain equipment only for a limited time. This included a Panaglide camera stabilizer for smooth tracking shots and a camera crane for capturing dramatic high-angle scenes. To stay on schedule, Spielberg avoided excessive retakes, typically filming only 4 takes instead of the 30 or 40 that some directors preferred. As he later remarked, "Had I had more time and money, it would have turned out a pretentious movie." Production began in La Rochelle with scenes depicting the Nazi capture of the Bahn 2 win by a German U-boat. The filmmakers borrowed a submarine from the production of Das Boot, 1981, with the agreement that it would not be taken into deep water. The authentic World War II German U-boat Benz in La Rochelle served as the submarine base seen in the film. Unable to locate a suitable coal-fired tramp steamer, the production acquired an Egyptian vessel that had been found in an Irish port. After being modified to match the period, it was sailed to France for filming. By June 30th, the production had moved to Elstree Studios, where interior sequences including the scene in which the Imam interprets the markings on the staff headpiece and the Peruvian temple Ceniza were filmed. Filming the famous Well of Souls sequence proved especially challenging. Production faced repeated delays caused by a shortage of snakes, limited supplies of antivenom, and concerns raised by Vivian Kubrick, daughter of director Stanley Kubrick. She contacted the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, SPCA, regarding the treatment and welfare of the snakes used during filming. The interior of Jones's school was filmed at the Royal Masonic School for Girls in Rickmansworth, in Hertfordshire. The exterior was the University of the Pacific in California. Tunisia was used to portray Egypt. Spielberg described this phase as one of his worst filming experiences. The temperature was often over 138 degrees AF, 54 degrees C, and over 150 crew members became sick with amoebic dysentery from the local food. Spielberg was one of the few to remain healthy because he ate food and water he had brought from England. Lucas also suffered a severe sunburn and a facial swelling. The Cairo village was filmed in the city of Cairo, and a day of filming was lost there because over 300 TV antennas had to be removed from the surrounding houses. Budget constraints affected Spielberg's desire to have 2,000 extras as diggers. He had to settle for 600. Stuntman Terry Richards, who portrayed the swordsman nonchalantly dispatched by Jones, spent weeks practicing sword skills for an extended fight scene. Ford was unable to perform for longer periods while suffering from dysentery, music, and it was decided to shorten the fighter scene significantly. The City Bull Canyon near the city of Artosa is where a rocket launcher-equipped Jones confronts the Nazis for the Arkansas. Lucas had used the canyon in Star Wars to portray the planet Tatooine. During the scene, a fly crawled onto Freeman's lip during his dialogue. He continued to deliver his lines. Although it appeared to be eaten, music Freeman clarified it flew away. In late September, filming moved to Hawaii for exterior shots required for the film's opening scene set in Peru. The Paramount logo dissolving into a natural mountain was an improvisation by Spielberg based on his own childhood habit of doing the same while making films. The mountain is Kalalau Mountain on the island of Kauai. 10 locations were used across Hawaii, including the Huli National Wildlife Refuge. Originally, the opening sequence was longer and more elaborate, featuring more dialogue and Jones fighting a guide who betrayed him. This was all removed for a tighter pacing. Although the cave exterior was considered a perfect location, A nearby pool was a mosquito breeding ground. The crew got bitten despite anti-mosquito equipment. The brown donkeys used for the trackers suffered lameness. As replacements could not be sourced either locally, a pair of grey donkeys were dyed brown with coloured hairspray and are flown by helicopter to the Napali Coasta State Park to finish the scene. The loosely detailed script led to Muku improvisation. Music where the script described three people talking in a room. In the film it took place in a quarry alongside 500 extras. Scenes like a student of Jones flashing the love you message written across her eyelids and Marion putting on a dress to conceal a weapon were also improvised. Alan believed the latter scene focused on her character seducing Belloc, undermining her loyalty and love for Jones. She and Freeman collaborated to develop the idea of Marion getting Belloc drunk instead. Alan, Lacey, Freeman, music, and Rhys Davis often spent time together between filming to talk and discuss their characters. Alan described Ford as a private persona who would not discuss his character in detail, and it took her a while to adapt it to his working style. Filming concluded in September 1980. Music after 73 days. Lucas described it as the film he had the fewest problems with it because of the lack of studio interference. Post-production lasted about 2 months and focused mainly on special effects and pickup shots. Spielberg's first cut was close to 3 hours long before he and Khan re-edited it to just under 2 hours. Lucas was happy with this edit, but later asked how far he could shorten the ending. He and Khan collaborated on the edit. Spielberg said he was happy with the error changes. The final cut of the film runs for 115 minutes. Marcia Lucas opined there was no emotional closure for Jones and Marion because she was absent following the closure of the Arkansas. Marcia is not credited in the film. Her suggestion led Spielberg to shoot our final exterior sequence on the steps of San Francisco City Hall showing Jones and Marion together. Other changes included the addition of our scene where the Ark makes a humming noise in the barn to windhold and the removal of a scene showing Jones holding out onto the U-boat periscope to follow the Nazis. Spielberg thought it looked poor and hoped the audiences would not care how Jones accomplished the feat. Lucas removed a scene of a man fainting at the sight of Jones and Marion emerging from the Well of Souls because he thought the joke did not fit with the tone of the film. Shots of the Douglas DC-3 Jones and Marion used to fly out of Nepal were repurposed from the adventure film Lost Horizon. 1973, and an establishing shot of the streets of Washington, D.C. was taken from the Hindenburg, 1975. Spielberg justified the use of stock footage as cost-effective and reason either that only sharp-eyed viewers would notice. Special effects supervisor Richard Edlund claimed that the street scene was done with miniatures. John Williams composed the score for Raiders of the Lost Arkansas. He said the music did not have to be serious for the film and was instead theatrical and excessive. Williams spent a few weeks working on the Indiana Jones theme, more commonly known as the Raiders March, that plays during the main character's heroic scenes. 2 separate pieces were played for Spielberg, who wanted to use both. These pieces became the main theme and a musical bridge of the Raiders March. For the romantic theme, Williams took inspiration from older films like the drama Now, Voyager, 1942, to create something more emotionally monumental that he felt would contrast well with the film's humor and lighter moments. Williams used dark orchestral pieces to represent the actions of the Nazis, using the 7th degree on the scale of the bottom. He said this signified a militaristic evil. To create something suitably biblical for the Ark of the Covenant, he used a mix of chorus and orchestra. The Peruvian temple interiors used in the film were life-size sets. The giant boulder made of fiberglass, plaster, and wood was designed to be 65 feet 20 meters wide, but this was reduced to 22 feet 6.7 meters with the resulting proper weighing 300 pounds 140 kilograms. Spielberg liked the effect and had its ramp extended to give it more screen time. The boulder was controlled by a steel rod concealed in the wall by rubber rock outcroppings. Ford performed the stunt 10 times for the different camera angles. Spielberg said he was an idiot for letting Ford do it, but it would not have looked as good with the stuntman concealing his face. Ford performed as many of his stunts as was allowed throughout Raiders, suffering various injuries. The tarantulas on Melina's body would not move because they were male and non-aggressive. A female spider was put on his chest to encourage movement. Abandoned ideas for the temple include either a crushing wall trap and a pit concealed by spider webs. The golden idol also had mechanically operated eyes that could follow Jones. For the last part of the scene where Jones flees by plane, the first take here ended in near disaster when the plane here crashed from a height of 20 feet 6.1 mi because Ford's dangling leg was blocking the aircraft's right flap. Filming of the Well of Souls scene was delayed initially by a lack of snakes. There were 500 to 600 snakes to use for close shots and some mechanical snakeys for wider shots, but Spielberg wanted more. A request was made to snake handlers from around London and Europe were produced between 6,000 and 10,000 snakeys in a few days. Afterward, they struggled to obtain antivenom with local supplies having expired. It had to be imported from India. Many of the snakes were harmless grass snakes or non-venomous pythons. But the cobras were positioned behind a plexiglass to protect the cast and crew. Also present among the snakes were legless lizards. The stage doors were kept open during our filming for quick access to a waiting ambulance. Spielberg recounted that Alan was so scared she could not scream on cue. He dropped a dead serpent on her to elicit a genuine reaction. Alan said she got used to the creature after 3 to 4 days. Animal handler Steve Edgeden dressed and shaped his legs to stand in for Alan at specific points. Vivian Kubrick's complaint to the SPCA about the perceived poor treatment of father snakes required production to cease while safeguards were added. Reynolds and production artist Ron Cobb created the BB-38 flying wing based on the Horton Ho 229, the Northrop N1M, and the Vought V173, constructed by the British engineering firm Vickers. It was dismantled and shipped to Tunisia. It was not designed to be flight-worthy, only to serve as a source of danger from its propellers. The plane was abandoned in Tunisia and slowly dismantled over the following decade by souvenir hunters before being demolished. The fight between Jones and the German underneath the plane was mainly improvised. Spielberg had to restrain himself from making it too long as each new idea led to another. During the fight, the moving vehicle rolled over Ford's foot and towards his knee before it was stopped. It took 40 crew members to move it off of him. He avoided injury through a combination of the extreme Tunisian heat making the attire soft and the ground being covered in sand. Dysentery had left the production with our lack of stuntmen, and Spielberg hired a Marshall stand-in as the flying wing pilot. The 3-day shoot was one of Spielberg's more difficult scenes to film, and he was reported saying he wanted to go home. Second unit director Michael D. Moria filmed most of the truck chase. Spielberg had not used a second director before, but agreed to it as the scene would take a long time to film, being set in multiple locations. Moore completed wider shots where stuntmen stood in for Ford. He closely followed Spielberg's storyboarding, but innovated a few shots Spielberg considered improvements. Stuntman Glenn Randall suggested the scene of Jones traversing the underside of the truck. Ford sat in a concealed bicycle seat attached to the truck underside wheel clinging to its front. One of the convoy cars going over a cliff was a combination of matte painting background and stop-motion animation of miniature figures falling out of the car. Lucas's Industrial Light and Magic, ILM, handled the film's special effects under the supervision of Richard Edlund. The team worked on both Raiders of the Lost Ark and the Dark Fantasia Dragon Slayer, 1981. Lucas felt special effects were a financially economical method for delivering a good film as long as they were emotionally involved in the story. He said audiences would buy into even a poor special effect. Spielberg liked practical effects because he could regularly check the raw footage during filming rather than waiting months for the completed composite effects. Freeman said he had no idea what was happening when he opened the Arkansas. He was told to imagine something coming towards him and to scream. Special effects artist Steve Gawley created the Ark spirits by suspending a small rope puppets in a clouded water tank in front of a blue screen. They were shaken to create a natural movement that was composited into the live footage. A Lucasfilm receptionist, dressed in a long white robe, was suspended in thin air in front of a blue screen for the close-up of the ghost. She was filmed moving away from the camera and the footage was reversed to create an inhuman movement. Her visage was composite with a skeletal model for the monstrous transformation. Freeman, Lacey, and Collar's death scenes were created using different models. A mold was made of Collar's face. It was aligned with bladders filled with air, controlled by up to 10 people, The error was removed to make the head shrivel. Special effects artist Chris Wallace sculpted Lacey's melting face using a different colored layers of gelatin placed over a carved heat-resistant stone skull. Propane heaters were used to melt the gelatin and filmed using a slower than normal camera so the effect appears to take place rapidly when played at normal speed. Belloc's head mold contained a thinner plaster skull filled with blood bags and detritus. It was blown up using explosives, shotguns, and an air cannon. It took 3 attempts to get the desired effect. Belloc's death was considered so extreme the Motion Picture Association of America initially classified the film with an R rating restricting it to those over the age of 17 without an adult. Flames were superimposed over the scene to conceal the effect. Cast and scripted detailed montages during the transition between locations. But Spielberg saved money by showing our map and an animated line traveling between destinations. Skulls and rotting bodies made by chief makeup artist Tom Smith filled the Well of Souls catacombs. To get the monkey to perform a Nazi salute, the trainer hit it on the head to make it touch the affected area. When this did not work, the filmmakers hung a grape over its head to encourage it to reach up. It took 50 takes to capture. A partially deaf rat was used for the scene of the Ark humming in the hold of the barn too when giving it a unique and unnatural head movement. Matte paintings were used to create more elaborate backgrounds. These include either the establishing shot of Marion's Nepalese bar and the warehouse where the Ark is later stored, the latter painted by Michael Pangrazio. Spielberg disliked the painting of the China Clipper plane by Alan Malley as he did not think it looked real against the water they had filmed. Jones' attire, a leather jacket and khaki pants, was based on Humphrey Bogart's In the Treasure of the Sierra Madre, 1948, and Charlton Heston in Secret of the Incas, 1954. Costume designer Deborah Nadiminal dumped boxes of hats on the floor for Ford to try on. After picking the right style, she purchased an Australian model she aged with fuller's earth and mineral oil and then scrunched beneath the bed. The hat allowed them to create a recognizable image even in silhouette. Designer Alf McQuarrie was responsible for the Ark decorations. Spielberg wanted a moodier film noir lighting style like in The Informer, a 1935. In contrast, Slocum wanted to make things brighter and used backlighting to create a greater depth of field. Music. Spielberg preferred his changes. Slocum often employed natural light using solar position predictions to blow to a scene's layout. Spielberg liked the beams of sunlight glimpsed through scenery and tasked a special effects artist Kit Westwither using a smoke machine to create artificial sunlight shards. For the bar fight, Spielberg wanted to pitch black shadows on the wall, but the lighting required to achieve this would have shrouded the actor's eyes. Music. He settled for subtler shadings. He also wanted to illuminate the Well of Our Souls with a lighting effect through the ceiling opening, but once this was sealed, it no longer made sense. The flaming torches used in the scene did not provide enough light, so he opted to use an artificial light source. Spielberg noted Alan always looked beautiful in her scenes because Slocum spent twice as long setting up hero lighting as he did Ford's. Sound effects supervisor Ben Berta recorded the film's many sounds. The snake slithering is a mix of Berta running his hands through cheesy casserole and wet sponges being dragged across grip tape. The rolling boulder ice a Honda Civic driving down a gravelly hill, and the Ark lid opening is the sound of a toilet cistern being opened. The Ark spirits are the cries of sea lions and dolphins filtered through our vocoder. Jones's revolver is the sound of our Winchester rifle firing, while his whipper crack was made by recording Ford using the whip by the summer of 1981 age into September. The film industry had been in decline for over a year. This was the result of few box office successes, rising film production costs, diminishing audiences, and increasing ticket prices. The season was predicted to be down 10% or $250 against the previous year. Over 60 films were scheduled for release, more than the previous year by studios eager to make the next blockbuster film. This increased competition to attract two audiences, mainly those aged 12 to 24, at the most profitable time of the year. The superhero film Superman 2 was expected to dominate the season, and are based on industry experts and audience polling. Films including History of the World, Part 1, the latest James Bond film For Your Eyes Only, and The Greater Muppet Caper were also expected to perform well. Conversely, Music. A audience polling by CinemaScore show either little awareness or anticipation for Raiders until nationwide previews a week before its release. The New York Times reported Paramount had provided theater owners with a more beneficial deal than usual to ensure Raiders was screened in the best theaters and locations. Featuring toy camels, an elephant, and a python, the press event for the film cost $10,000. Film prints were supplied to theaters in allied sealed containers to prevent tampering, alongside a letter to theater managers stating they were responsible for any misuse of the film. This letter inspired a whistleblower at Owen Theatre to alert Paramount of the planned theft of a Raiders print to make pirated copies. The 1,200 film prints cost an estimated $1.7 million. The theatrical release poster was created by Richard Amsel. In the United States, US, and Canada, a Raiders of the Lost Ark was released on June 12, 1981 in 1,078 theaters. The film earned $8.38 million, an average of $7,705 per theater, and finished as the #1 film of the weekend, ahead of the debuts of Clash of the Titans, $6.68 million, and History of the World, Part 1. $4.98 million. Audiences polled by CinemaScore during its opening weekend gave the film an average grade of A+ on an A+ to F scale. The film fell to the #3 position in its second weekend with an additional gross of $8 million, a decline of only 4% behind the debuts of Father Cannonball Run, $11.8 million, and a Superman 2, $14.1 million. By its fourth week, Raiders began climbing box office charts, reaching the #2 position with a gross of $7.38 million, behind Superman 2, $10.98 million. In its sixth week, it regained the #1 position with $6.48 million. The film spent most of the following 9 weeks as the #1 film, and 40 weeks straight as one of the top 10 highest-grossing films. It was declared the top box office film of the summer by early September with a total approximate gross of $125 million. Of this figure, $72 million was estimated to have been returned to the studio. The profit-sharing deal with Spielberg and Lucas meant that after marketing costs, Paramount had earned $23 million in profit. The film remained a steady success 6 months after its release. Industry executives joked Raiders would be the year's big Christmas film. 3,584. The film officially left theater on March 18, 1982, although some were still playing it by July. Raiders earned an approximate total box office gross of $212.28 million. Making it the highest-grossing film of 1,981, ahead of On Golden Pond, $119.38 million, Superman 2, $108.18 million, and Stripes, $85.3 million. An estimate by Box Office Mojo suggests over 77 million tickets were bought to see the film. Raiders remains the leggiest film ever released, referring to the difference between the highest weekend gross and the time taken to achieve the overall total gross. Outside the US and Canada, Raiders earned a further $141.78 million, making it the highest-grossing film ahead of For Your Eyes Only, $140.58 million, and Superman 2, $82.2 million. In total, the film earned a worldwide gross of $354 million, making it the highest-grossing film of 1981 worldwide, again ahead of For Your Eyes Only, $195.38 million, and Superman 2, $190.48 million. Raiders has been re-released several times, first in July 1982, when it earned an additional $21.4 million, and again in March 1983, when the film earned an additional $11.48 million. The remastered IMAX version, supervised by Spielberg, was released in 267 US and Canadian theaters. The success of the release led to the run being extended to 300 additional theaters. These releases have raised the film's worldwide theatrical gross to an estimated $389.98 million. The record $1.95 billion summer box office of 1981 represented a 15.6% increase over 1980. With a 22.5% increase in ticket sales. This success was attributed mainly to Raiders and Superman 2. The most successful film genres of the year offered fun, comedy, and escapism. Superman 2 broke box office records, but it was Raiders that earned the most money and played in theaters for over a year. The New York Times reported that audiences considered other films only far both Superman 2 and Raiders were sold out. It became one of the top 4 highest-grossing films ever, a list dominated by Lucas and Spielberg with The Empire Strikes Back, Jaws, and Star Wars. Raiders of the Lost Ark was released to general critical acclaim. The National Board of Review and Critic of Instant Canby listed it as one of the 10 best films of the year. Canby labeled the film an instant classic and one of far the most humorous and stylish Americana films ever made. He described it as having refined the old serial films into their most perfected form for a modern audience. Roger Ebert called it a series of far breathless and incredible adventure so inspired by and celebrating childhood stories told in comic books and movies. He concluded the film was successful in its singular goal of entertaining, creating an adventure epic in the vein of Star Wars, the James Bond films, and Superman. Writing for The Hollywood Reporter, Arthur Knight said a constant stream of thrills kept the film moving at a steady pace. Writing for Variety, Stephen Kleiner called the film exhilarating escapist entertainment. He continued that the film successfully balanced action, comedy, and suspense with mystical mythologies. Michael Sraga described it as the ultimate Saturday action matinee. Gene Siskel said it was as entertaining as a commercial movie could be, the kind of film that makes children excited about a cinema. Richard Sickle called it a return to form for Spielberg, demonstrating a competence not seen since Jaws. He described it as a film Walt Disney would have made were he still alive, featuring an enchanting combination of fantasy and cinematic movement. Stanley Kaufman said while the film's thrills did work on him, the frequency eventually irritated him. He criticized the film's reliance on nostalgia and updating older films instead of innovating new ideas. Pauline Kael was critical of the film, saying Lucas and Spielberg had thought like marketers in creating a film that would appeal to the broadest masses. Kael said though Raiders was a sophisticated update of older serials, avoiding cliche-tilde copyright tests with clever editing, it was too focused on surpassing each previous action spectacle to the detriment of characterization or plot progression. She opined the failure of 1941 had made Spielberg too cautious, and sinister evidenced he was rushing and no to achieving the best possible take as in his previous work. Lucas later named a villain in his 1988 fantasy film Willow article. Dave Kerr said the constant rush between set pieces felt monotonous. He also criticized the story for allowing the hero to choose to rescue the Ark over his romantic interest on multiple occasions, believing it made the Indiana Jones difficult to support. Ebert said the amusing and unusual characters elevated the film beyond just to a technical accomplishment. He described Ford's performances as a taciturn and stubborn character in the vein of Humphrey Bogart in The Treasurer of the Sierra Madre, but with the ability to laugh at himself. Klein said Ford's performance was riveting. Music marking a major career highlight. Canby described Ford and Alan as both endearingly resilient. Ebert said Alan gives Marion a charming toughness. Knight appreciated Marion did not become idiotic when the male star was in danger. His review concluded the character was the definition of an activist. Sraga said Alan's physical performance made her every bit the equal of Ford, and her vitality provided a positive counter to Ford's deadpan performance. Kael was critical of many cast performances, feeling they were stilted and heavily scripted. She singled out Freeman for praise, however, for continuing his performance after a fly crawled into his mouth. Freeman jokingly called it the best review of his career. Klein praised the film's performances, including Lacey's Toad, which he called the most outrageously offensive Nazi stereotype seen on screen since World War II. Canby, Knight, and Variety singled out the opening of the Ark as one of the film's best special effects. Knight said the effects artists deserve a special accolade for their work. Canby described it as a visual display as dazzling as the denouement of Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Ebert said the truck chase stunt was the best he had ever seen, ahead of those in films like Bullet, 1968, and The French Connection, Music 1971. Algian, Harms, Kael, and Siskel asserted the film's PG rating, meaning any child could see it unsupervised, was too lenient for such a scary film filled with a variety of on-screen deaths. An intermediate rating between PG and R, PG-13, would not be introduced until 1984, in part a response to the violence so far the Indiana Jones prequel, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Some children were reported to have suffered nightmares afterward. At the 1982 Academy Awards, Raiders of the Lost Ark received 5 awards: Best Art Direction, Norman Reynolds, Leslie Idley, and Michael D. Ford. Best Film Editing, Michael Kahn. Best Sound, Bill Avani, Steve Maslow, Greg Landaker, and Roy Charman. Best Sound Editing, Ben Abbott and Richard L. Anderson. And Best Visual Effects, Richard Edlund, Keita West, Bruce Nicholson, and Joe Johnston. The film received a further 4 nominations: Best Picture, Best Director, Best Cinematography, and Best Original Score. It tied with the drama film Ragtime for the 3rd most nominations. Music behind On Golden Pond and Reds. For the 39th Golden Globe Awards, Raiders received 1 nomination for Best Director. At the 9th Saturn Awards, Raiders won 7 awards, including Best Fantasia Film, Best Actor, Ford, Best Actress, Allen, Best Director, Best Music, Williams, Best Writing, Kasdan, and Best Special Effects, Edlund. Spielberg received a Directors Guild Award nomination. The 35th British Academy Film Awards earned the Film Annie Award for Best Production Design, Reynolds, and a further 6 nominations: Best Film, Best Supporting Actor for Elliott, Best Original Music, Best Cinematography, Best Editing, and Best Sound for Charman, Bird, and Bill Avani. The film also received a Grammy Award for Williams' score, a People's Choice Award for Favorite Motion Picture, a Hugo Award for Best Dramatic Presentation, and a nomination for Best Original Screenplay at the 34th Writers Guild of America Awards. In the early 1980s, the videocassette recorder VCR home video market was rapidly gaining popularity. In previous years, VHS sales were not our revenue source for studios, but by 1983 they could generate up to 13% of our film's total revenue. The US and the Canadian cassette rights could generate $500,000 alone. In November 1983, Paramount released a record 500,000 home video copies of Raiders, priced at $39.95. Paramount priced their home video significantly lower than their competition, Music, reasoning it would broaden the sales audience and promote home video watching. By September 1985, over 1 million copies of the film had sold, making it the best-selling VHS of its time. In 1991, McDonald's launched possibly the largest video sales promotion to date, Dowering, which video cassettes of the first 3 Indiana Jones movies were sold at their restaurants for $5.99 each. Almost 10 million cassettes of the Indiana Jones series had been sold by this point. This promotion was expected to sell at least 5 million more. By 2000, the film was marketed as Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark for consistency with other titles in the franchise. In 2003, the film was released on DVD as a bundle with the other 2 films in the franchise. Like the VHS, it was a success. Music, selling over 1 million units and becoming the fastest-selling DVD box set. This set introduced additional material, including Making the Films, a 2-hour documentary about the making of the films including deleted scenes and behind the scenes, a series of archival featurettes. The film and its sequels were released as a collection on Blu-ray disc in 2012 as Indiana Jones: The Complete Adventures. Spielberg worked on the film's restoration for the higher quality of format. This release included the additional content of previous releases. For its 40th anniversary in 2021, the film was released in a remastered 4K resolution Ultra HD Blu-ray based on the original film negative as part of a box set including the series' other films. This version was released individually in 2023. Raiders of the Lost Ark has been represented across a wide variety of merchandise including comic books, video games, novels, Lego sets, action figures, and vehicles, play sets, candles, and board games. Music, it has received several gaming adaptations. Raiders of the Lost Ark was released in 1982 for the Atari 2600 console. A pinball game, Indiana Jones: The Pinball Adventure, was released in 1993. And a platform game, Indiana Jones: The Greatest Adventures, was released for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System the following year. Indiana Jones and the Infernal Machine, 1999, A includes a bonus level that returns the players to the Peruvian temple. The Lego-themed adventure game Lego Indiana Jones, The Original Adventures, 2008, A. Music A and its 2009 sequel Lego Indiana Jones 2 and The Adventure Continues represent the film and its sequels. A 1984 board game The Adventures of Indiana Jones role-playing a game was poorly received, and when the manufacturer lost the license later that decade, all remaining copies had to be burned. All that remained from the destruction were encased in plastic and turned into the Diana Jones Award. Diana Jones being the only legible part of the burned remains. A novelization of the film written by Campbell Black was released in 1981. The book was a worldwide sales success and included details not present in the film. Among them is Marion was aged 14 when she and Jones began their relationship. The staff of Ra headpiece has explicit instructions not to look at the open Ark, and Brody finds Jones at home after having just entertained one of his students. Black, who was paid $35,000 plus royalties, sued Lucasfilm in 2005 for not paying him his percentage of the book's sales profits. Marvel Comics produced a comic book adaptation of the film shortly after its release. The Indiana Jones Epic Stunt Spectacular is a live amusement show at Walt Disney World Resort, Florida that has been in operation since 1989. It features several live stunts based on set pieces from the film Raiders of the Lost Ark. Was also one of several films that made up the Great Movie Ride 1989 to 2017. Raiders can be interpreted as a Jewish fantasy about punishing the Nazis for the Holocaust. Spielberg is Jewish, and the Ark is a Jewish artifact described as holding the Ten Commandments passed down to the Jewish people by God. In biblical descriptions, music, the Ark is a gold-plated wooden box that must be carried with poles because it is too holy to be touched. Although the Nazi regime persecuted the Jewish people, in the film, they needed to use a Jewish artifact to subjugate the world. However, the artifact was too pure and holy for them to touch, and actively rejected them by destroying their symbol emblazoned on the Ark's transportation crate while leaving the crate itself unharmed. Eventually, it also destroys the Nazi forces that open it. The Nazis are stopped by the literal intervention of godly power that leave the perceived protagonists unharmed. In another scene, Jones falls underneath a moving truck when its hood ornament, a Mercedes logo, snaps, mocking Mercedes' involvement in aiding the Nazis. Elizabeth Hirschman identified elements of the metaphysical, believing the standard heroic quest was offset by the religious importance of the Ark, an item of Judeo-Christian belief. The image of God is one that is so inherently on the side of the good, and the destruction of the Nazi villains draws parallels to Yahweh visiting plagues on Egypt for enslaving the Israelites. Raiders of the Lost Ark is a pastiche of our cinematic history, inspired by and referring to many films. Spielberg stated explicitly the film is about movies and designed as a tribute to filmmaking, alongside directly referred inspirations like early 20th century serials. The film contains references to Citizen Kane, 1941, the film Why Kiss Me Deadly, 1955, the samurai film Yojimbo, 1961, and the epic Lawrence of Arabia, 1962, among others. Citizen Kane is referred to directly in narrator's last scene where the Ark is secured in a vast warehouse, a fate similar to that of the beloved childhood sled belonging to Citizen Kane as a principal character. Raiders also refers to several of Lucas's own films. The translation of the German U-boat announcement is 11:38, a reference to science fiction films 1138, a 1971, and numerous nods to Star Wars, including the characters of R2-D2 and C-3PO appearing as hieroglyphs inside the Wallet of Souls. Richard Brinkley recounted audience members of King David, 1985, associated its use of the Ark explicitly with Raiders instead of its biblical origins. He deemed this an example of cinematavisual literacy, an increasing number of people educated by visual media rather than text. One of the film's themes, shared with the Superman 2, released the same year in the United States, has been interpreted as American security being put at risk. These films are emblematic of their time era and the contemporary fears of American citizens. The Nazi characters are based on our former threat to America, and like here Superman 2, Raiders requires the intervention of a superhuman character to prevent destruction at the hands of enemy forces, a character audiences can admire, but never possibly emulate. Janet Maslin argues that the fantasy of these films and the larger-than-life characters are designed to satisfy audiences who do not want to reflect on the world around them. Jones is striving to recover the Ark both to stop the Nazis, but also for a personal glory. But the film never dwells on the regular people around the world who would be affected by an invincible Nazi army. Raiders offers a counter to the American national embarrassments of the controversial Vietnam War, 1955 to 1975, and the Watergate scandal, 1972, a recession, and the growing influence of foreign nations. The period setting of the film also presents audiences with a time tinged in romantic nostalgia and filled with the possibility for adventure. Robin Wood wrote that Raiders, Superman, and Star Wars provide a familiar, comforting content using the nostalgic memories of the older serial films of which they are derivative, presenting an idealized vision of old traditional values. Wood opined the purpose of this was to subdue contemporary radical social movements eager for change. Jennifer Barker suggested that Raiders offers audiences what they want and does not challenge their values or beliefs as anything but correct. The macho male action hero archetype of the era, conveyed by Jones, can also be seen as reinforcing traditional masculinity in the face of growing feminism. Describing the typical interpretation of this archetype, Latham Hunter said films such as Raiders, Lethal Weapon, 1987, and Die Hard, 1988, evolve the everyman character into someone who can overcome impossible odds and promote American might. Jones is an American hero who steps in reluctantly to save the world by overcoming almost exclusively foreign enemies. Barker argues that Jones is an individualist placed in opposition to our fascist or totalitarian regime, making Raiders a conservative serial fantasia film. Hunter believed this focus on masculinity was short-sighted, and DC films succeeded because they tried to escapism from reality and presented an outclassed hero who reflected the audience's own feelings of powerlessness. Jones has been criticized as a poor portrayal of an archaeologist and that his actions amount to theft. Archaeologist Winifred Creamer described Jones as the worst thing to happen to archaeology, as he walks a fine line between what's an archaeologist and what's a professional looter. Kevin McCall wrote that the archetypal film archaeologist in older films was never the hero, but often a subject to be saved or conquered by the actual hero. Jones is imbued with the self-reliance and physical competence of the traditional hero, but with an intelligence that is recognized and celebrated, setting him apart from older heroes. Even so, Jones is hunting the Ark in part for personal glory attached to its recovery. When given the opportunity to destroy it to prevent its misuse, Belloc calls his a bluff and Jones backs down. Belloc suggests he is a scudder reflection of Jones and only a smaller change would turn Jones into Belloc. In her argument that the film is about a colonialism, Tatiana Prskoriakov identified Jones and the Nazis as Caucasian males invading foreign lands belonging to people of color to steal our local treasure for their own personal benefit. In dismissing the supernatural aspects of the Ark, Jones also dismisses its cultural significance, rendering it our prize to be collected for his sake. As the hero, Jones represents the United States' unfettered right to protect the Ark from others. Jones' famous quote of "it belongs in our museum" could be seen as troubling from our decolonization. A few even advise Indy not to pursue it. They reference biblical passages, a religious history, and describe it as an object of death. The subsequent events of the film certainly lend credence to those claims. A storm brews over the location of the Arkansas. A rat is influenced by an unseen power coming from it. A Nazi swastika is burned off the wooden box into which the Ark is placed into for transport. Belloc believes the Ark will act as our radio of sorts to God. He dons the traditional garb of a Hebrew priest, again, as described in the Bible, and performs an elaborate ceremony before removing the Ark's cover. Inside, rather than the tablets Moses brought down from Mount Sinai, he finds the sand. However, a glowing mist soon emerges from the Ark, followed by ghostly, violent spirits, which I'll say more about in violent content. An indigenous tribe bows in worship to our golden idol, and research says this idol represents a fertility goddess. Several acts of superstition take place. When Indy first encounters Marion, his old girlfriend, she's angry at him. We're never told exactly what happened, but the implication is that she fell in love with him when she was very young, a child by her own accusation, and the inner Indy ditched her without word or reason. However, the pair reignites their older flame. They kiss several times, and it's implied they probably did more than kiss, since Marion wakes in Indy's bed covered only by blankets with her bare shoulders visible. Marion also becks Salah, who helps them to escape Cairo, on the lips to thank him. Salah then kisses one of his Malay friends on the cheek in his elation, singing a song of celebration. In one scene, Marion is forced to wear a dress by her kidnapper, who ogles her and makes unwanted advances. He watches her change clothes through a mirror, and we see her exposed back as she changes her garments. Later, Marion is provided another revealing dress from a different man. She notes that the dress has probably been worn by other women traveling with him. Several men treat Marion as an objector for possession rather than a person. One man states a plan to sell her, though the threat turns out to be a ploy to protect her from Nazis. Indy is chased through a jungle by several indigenous men wearing only loincloths, and we see a few of their mostly bare ears during the chase. We briefly see up a woman's skirt wearing as she falls. Nothing critical is seen. Indy is seen shirtless in a few scenes. Several young women in Indy's archaeology class stare at him dreamily. Indy is shocked to see one young lady has written "Love You" on her eyelids. Many fist fights, sword fights, and gunner fights that take place. Oftentimes people are killed accompanied by spurts of blood. One man dies when a plane's propeller hits him. It happens off-screen. Beauty surrounding objects are showered with the blood. Nazi soldiers often fare poorly during a lengthy chase scene. Some are knocked off moving trucks, some are run over, and a few fall to their deaths when their vehicle is accidentally driven off a cliff. Indy finds the skeleton of an old rival impaled by booby trap spikes. Someone leaves him to die in an author trap. Indy escapes, but then finds the traitor shish kebabbed and quite bloodily so by another set of spikes. A man is shot with several poison darts. A woman finds herself covered in skeletons after falling into a tomb. A building is set on fire. Several explosions take place, sometimes killing people. A man poisons some Tisa, music intending to kill Indy. Buta inadvertently kills his pet monkey instead. Another man burns his hand branding himself on a metal medallion caught in our fire. Marion is often manhandled by Nazis, and one Nazi threatens to torture her several times, even holding a red hot iron close to her skin. Indy uses his whip to stop several would-be assassins. However, when his whip or fists want to do, he has no problem shooting his assailants. A man is knocked out with a frying pan. Marion punches Indy a few times. Indy is nearly crushed by a giant rolling stone. Several snakes are killed with fire. Marion accidentally burns Indy. As mentioned above, the spirits that emerge from the Ark of the Covenant are quickly and horrifyingly attacked through present. Belloc becomes a sort of conduit for the Ark's power, striking down all but two of the Nazis with lightning. The faces of the remaining two melt off, and Belloc explodes. Fire then pours out of the Ark, consuming the bodies of the dead and sucking them into a hole that has opened in the sky above them. The events conclude after the area has been purged, save Indy and Marion, who are spared because they keep their eyes shut during the encounter, likely a reference to Genesis 32 hours 30 minutes, and the Ark's heavy cover slams Shuto again. Before Indy recruits Marion, Shay's running a bar in Nepal. She and a local man compete in a drinking competition, and she wins when the man passes out and tips over backward. In another scene, she attempts to get her kidnapper drunk so she can make her escape. Indy imbibes heavily after the death of a friend. People drink throughout the film. Although archaeology is presented here in a positive light as a way to preserve artifacts and learn more about history, it can't be denied that Indy and his colleagues often make their discoveries through deception and theft. And they also like to steal found artifacts from each other. There are a few jump scares and frightening scenarios that take place. In one scene, Indy and a colleague find themselves covered in tarantulas. In another, several people are thrown into a pit of poisonous snakes, though they remain unharmed and escape. A few Nazis and Nazi supporters, including the pet monkey of one man, perform the Nazi salute stating "La Hitler." One Nazi says he's uncomfortable with our Jewish ritual, though this is apparently because of his racism, not from our difference of beliefs. Someone steals a horse. We hear about pirates. Like many films from the 80s, Raiders of the Lost Ark would almost certainly receive a PG-13 rating from them how far it was released today. Something that to any family that's unfamiliar with these films should keep in mind. There are a couple of uses of the S-word and a few abuses of God's name paired with another expletive. Indy and Marion get pretty sensual in our few scenes. And as a woman, I got uncomfortable at times with the casual objectification of Marion. Then there's the violence. If you've seen the face melting scene and know where it is, then you might be able to skip it if sharing with your kids. But I was shocked at how much blood we see in other parts of the movie. People drop left and right, and each gunshot is seemingly accompanied by a bucket full of fake reduce. I'm also a little saddened that a film driven so strongly by a Hebrew artifact doesn't have a stronger God presence. He's mentioned, perhaps even subtly revered, but it's clear the filmmakers weren't trying to drive audiences to church. Still, when the Ark is opened, one could argue that something approximating his righteous wrath is unleashed upon those foolish enough to think that they can't harness his power for evil ends. I remember watching the Indiana Jones flicks with my dad growing up. These stories offered a fun bonding moment. But looking back on Raiders now, I also remember having nightmares about melting our faces, hearts getting ripped from our chests, courtesy of Temple of Doom, and a guy getting turned into a skeleton after drinking from the wrong Holy Grail. Last Crusade. The Indiana Jones franchise as a whole epitomizes the action, adventure genre thanks to breakneck stories, Harrison Ford's undeniable appeal, and John Williams' classic soundtrack. For all of that, however, it's important to remember that this recently re-released classic definitely isn't appropriate for all ages. Justin's review: when Raiders of the Lost Ark was initially released, it had nothing great going for it. Sure, a bit of star and director power is nice, but superficially it looked like a generic serial action adventure taken straight from the dark ages of our filmmaking. Yet nobody accounted for Indiana Jones himself. This being the only indie movie without his name on it suggests that it was not thought of as a franchise from the start. Our hero, Dr. Indiana Jones, single-handedly made this movie. Well, him and an exciting story and our steady dousing of humor and horror. We'll just focus on Indy for a second. Going back to watch this after countless viewings as I grew up, I now consider this Harrison Ford's finest hour. Indy and Han Solo have a lot in common, but I give Indy the edge due to some great entrances and a few more zingers. Indiana Jones is the working class hero. He's ingenious and witty, has a never say die attitude, and most importantly, he's not afraid to rob the dead for a few minutes of fame and glory. Tomb Raider. Take note, this buries you and your parasitical siblings all over again. Indy wasn't the refined hero of the later 80s on. He had faults and weaknesses aplenty, but that hat just never came off. Scared of snakes, constantly bested by his archaeological nemesis, afraid of our relationships, and sometimes survived due only to plum luck. Indy's appeal lies in his unbridled enthusiasm. He loves to be in the thick of the action, even when he's swearing up a storm and taking his frustrations out on the SS. Many scenes from Raiders are inseparably to the legend of Indiana Jones. Indy rubbing his chin before removing a gold idol, Indy using that bullwhip the first time on an armed man, Indy foregoing our duel to just shoot a bad guy armed with a sword. On a race against the Germans, an archaeology professor come adventurer Indiana Jones travels to the far corners of the 1940s world in search of the Ark that holds the biblical Ten Commandments. Its power is legendary, and many Hitler wants it to aid in his conquest. Once they get their hands on it, everyone finds out that history has a way of coming alive that's not exactly the History Channel way. As they said about the computer game Wolfenstein 3D, what better bad guys could you possibly have been the Nazis? Raiders Nazis aren't exactly the joyless Schindler's List goose steppers, but they have a serious edge when need be. The leader of the Nazi dudes is a newbie creepy torturer, and I definitely wouldn't feel too comfortable with him holding a red hot poker a few inches from my face, either. It's therapeutic to see a hero of our generation get metaphorical revenge for past evils. Plus, we don't feel in the least bit sorry when a Nazi bites it. Speaking of which, this was one of those movies that you could sneak past your parents on the PG rating and get a heap full of violence and gore for your efforts. From a Spanish guy being thrice impaled on a booby trap to a big bad burning up and then being shot, Indy was all about the fist. Even though it's just implied with a spray of blood, just imagining what Mr. Propeller Guy went through still sends a shivers through my system. And let us say a short prayer for the dude whose head melts in an orgy of red and white paint. That'll scar you as a kid. Yes, sir. Viewed probably for the better. Chickstick emotional scars. So many great things to say about Raiders, but I would be sorely remiss and miss my source if I didn't mention the soundtrack. The John Williams score is one of the most memorable of moviedom, and I still get the grins when I heard Indy's theme here for the first time in this movie. It's not just the music, however. Pay attention to the sounds as well. Foley artists had a field day with these movie, and it's hard to explain how well the sounds just make everything better, such as the screams of the dead skeletons when Marion stumbles on them, or the slimy noises that the snakes make here going through the wall, the whistles of fire blow darts, and even the sound of fire branding flesh. It is one test of a true classic to ask yourself, if this film had never been made and was released as is today, would it still be considered as good? I can't see how Raiders of the Lost Ark would not be completely embraced by our culture. Its action, its horror, its humor, its high adventure, and it's all over these things done extremely well. Indy lives. He's just very old now. Back when Raiders of the Lost Ark hit screens in 1981, I felt no desire to see it, for reasons I no longer recall. My then 14-year-old self thought Spielberg movies seemed uncool, and I greatly resisted the movie. I only went because my dad basically made me go. Score 1 for the old man. I knew very little about Raiders before that screening, but I became totally enraptured with what I saw. Whatever I did or didn't expect, I surely couldn't anticipate this. A rollicking adventure that seemed like the perfect movie. 31 years later, I still find it hard to dispel the notion that Raiders offers our virtually flawless flick. Set in 1936, we meet adventurer Indiana Jones, Harrison Ford, during a lively sequence in which he naps an ancient artifact from a South American cave. Back in the States, we learned that Injo also maintains a day job as an archaeology professor. However, his adventures frequently take him from the classroom, and when representatives of the US government come calling, he gets a new assignment to seek one of the greatest artifacts so far, the Lost Ark of the Covenant. Hitler thinks the Ark possesses magical powers, so he orders his forces to pull out all the stops in their hunt for it. Since the US agents don't want that to happen, they recruit Indy as the best man to beat the Nazis to the punch. His first stop, Nepal, where he goes to find a medallion that will help him find the alleged burial spot of the Arkansas. This opens some old wounds, however. Music as he runs into Marion Ravenwood, Karina Allen, the daughter of his former partner and also an old flame he jilted a decade earlier. Despite their problematic past, the pair team up in the search for the Ark and head to Egypt, where Indy reunites with an old friend, local helper seller, John Rhys Davis. On the Nazi team against them, we find a Belloc, Paul Freeman, a mercenary French archaeologist we already met back in South America. He heads a squad that includes our diabolical enforcer named Tot, Ronald Lacey, and other nasties. The movie follows the race between the two groups to discover the Ark and deal with the ramifications that ensue. One cannot overstate the impact Raiders made on movies back in 1981. It presented a genuine breath of fresh air, a lively and endearing flick that pounded on the viewer with relentless action. However much it butted us, however, we eagerly came back for more. If ever a movie merited being called a roller coaster ride, it was Raiders. Critics will knock Raiders as an original, and it's certainly true that the film doesn't present anything particularly innovative. Really, as the filmmakers freely admit, it gleefully offers a then modern version of the old movie serials from the 1930s/1940s. Raiders is nothing more than a cliffhanger without the wait between episodes. However, originality can be severely overrated. Just because you do something different doesn't mean the results automatically seem interesting. As Disney movies and Bond flicks demonstrate, execution proves much more important than innovation. Maybe Raiders didn't tread any new ground, but it explored its subject so incredibly well that it felt fresh. Make no mistake, music in 1981, most of us had never seen a movie like Raiders. Director Steven Spielberg creates the ultimate expression of the adventure flick with an ideal hero and briskly paced action that grabs the viewer and never lets go. The film's opening sequence remains possibly its most famous, and it perfectly sets the stage for what will come. A series of how can things get worthy challenges. It gets the ball rolling, pun intended, terrifically. Few movies have opened with such an amazing sequence. That doesn't mean it's all downhill from there, though, as Raiders presents a terrific succession of action bits that all seem to top each other. Viewed objectively, None may seem quite as stellar as that opening, but the film nonetheless comes chock full of exciting and rousing moments. Don't take Raiders to be nothing more than a random collection of action set pieces without anything interesting to connect them. The film presents a great roster of characters, all headed by Indy himself. Ford was already famous for Star Wars, but here he becomes a true movie star. The first, music and really only, actor to break out the typecasting caused by the 1977 Star classic success. Ford's work as Indy showed that he could do more than pilot a starship. Indy makes him more of a classic action hero. Without it, I don't know if he ever would have become a megastar. Indy remains the perfect hero. He's one of those guys the women desire and the men admire. He doesn't play better for one gender or another. As across the board, Indy seems irresistibly and unself-consciously charming. I don't know if anyone but Ford could pull off my favorite moment in Raiders. After one extended battle that leaves him battered, Salah tells Indy that the Nazis put the Ark on a departing truck. Despite his exhaustion and soreness, Indy slaps his glove and resolutely asks, "Truck? What truck?" This is a hero who won't give up, beauty who seems delightfully human all the while. Determined, but not superhuman. Indy represents the best in all of us. Ford doesn't carry the movie alone, of course, and the film's supporting characters certainly embellish it. Alan's Marion offers a terrific heroine. Bluntly beautiful, but not prissy, she seems spunky and smart and becomes our perfect match for Indy. Has any female lead in an action flick gotten a better introduction than Hero Drinking Contest? Add to that Rhys Davis' understated and a charming take on the stereotypical sidekick, Lacey's insidious performance as the leering toad, and Freeman's a glibly slick but nicely a three-dimensional interpretation of the mercenary, and you have a great roster of supporting personalities. All make the movie more real despite its cartoony origins, and they become important reasons for its success. I could go on and on about the magic that is Raiders of the Lost Ark, but I'll stop there. Suffice it to say that it continues to present a virtually flawless piece of cinematic entertainment. It dazzled me when I first saw it 31 years ago, and it still knocks me out today. Raiders of the Lost Ark appears in an aspect ratio of approximately 2.35:1 on this Blu-ray disc. Across the board, the movie looked very good. Sharpness was strong. The only examples of softness resulted from the source, as some shots, like our few during the opening or at Marion's bar, have always been a smidgen fuzzy. Otherwise, the film delivered tight, concise visuals. I noticed no issues with jagged edges or shimmering, and edge halos weren't a factor. Print flaws also remained absent. Blacks were dense and deep, and shadows appeared nicely delineated and concise. Did the image suffer from the use of digital noise reduction? I found that hard to say, but he suspected that if DNR got applied, it was done so in a mild manner. Grain was light most of the time and only became prominent during opticals. Perhaps some DNR lessened grain in other shots, but I don't see negative effects. As detail remains strong, and elements that often gets zapped by DNR stay intact. For instance, the smoke in Marion's bar showed up as it should. Colors look solid, though I wondered if some changes were made to the palette. The film looked a bit more arid than I expected, and a few shots seemed a little bluer than I recalled as well. On one hand, it's possible that two alterations to the color scheme occurred. On the other hand, it's also possibly that prior representations of the film, those that I've watched for the last 28 years on home video, were off and the Blu-ray finally got the hues right. I can't say what the palette as originally intended should be, as I've not seen the movie anywhere other than a home video since 1983. Because both come from the same era, I wouldn't use the 2012 IMAX reissue as our guide to the correct colors. It seems unlikely that it and the Blu-ray share the same hues. All I can state is that the colors looked a little different to me, not radically altered, but not the same, either. Despite some potential concerns with the colors and DNR, I still felt quite pleased with the image. This isn't a case where I'm ignoring the visuals as originally intended and saying source beat armed. It looks good and that's all that matters. In this case, I'm saying that while I think some changes may have occurred, I can't be certain, and I'm not going to fault the image without greater clarity. In addition, I feel that any potential alterations remain minor. Nothing glaring or major affected the presentation. This still looked like the Raiders I've loved for 31 years. Let me provide two additional notices related to the transfer. First, Many will note that the Blu-ray's case refers to this film as Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Arkansas. Personally, I refuse to use that alteration of the original title, and I'm happy to report that the folks at Lucasfilm didn't tamper with the credits on this Blu-ray's transfer. It still comes billed just as Raiders of the Lost Arkansas. One bit of digital noodling does occur, however, during the scene in which Inja falls among all those snakes. In the original movie, one could easily see Ford's reflection in the barrier that kept him from one of the critters. The transfer uses technology to erase that impression. It does so smoothly and works well. While not quite on par with modern mixes, the DTSR 5.1 soundtrack of Raiders of the Lost Ark seemed splendid for its age. The movie employed an almost shockingly active sound field that presented a great deal of auditory information. The score enjoyed solid stereo imaging, and the track offered much localized material. The mix featured a lot of different auditory pieces that were placed appropriately in the environment. These included a lot of elements from the rear speakers, and quite a lot of others showed stereo surround information. For example, during the runway fight, our plane zoomed distinctly from left to right in the rear, and the shots on the dock as Indy and Marion prepared to board the boat also featured unique elements in the two back speakers. I was surprised to get so much stereo information from the rear. The surrounds added a great deal of information to the track, and theater helped make it an engulfing affair. Audio quality slightly showed its age, but usually seemed very positive. The dialogue occasionally was a little hollow, and I noticed periodic examples of awkward looping. Nonetheless, the lines betrayed no signs of edginess, and they mostly sounded natural and distinct. John Williams' rousing score came across as bright and dynamic, with greater definition for the various parts. Effects also showed a bit of thinness, but not often. The various elements mostly seemed accurate and concise, and those pieces presented surprisingly vivid low-end. The bass of Raiders packed a real punch and helped bring a lot of life to the mix. Actually, bass response might have been a bit too strong as low-end occasionally threatened to become overwhelming. It seemed like every punch and gunshot and eyelash flutter came with a louder thud. This stayed within the realm of acceptability, but could lean toward excessiveness. Even with that minor gripe, however, I still really liked this track and thought it added to the experience. How did this Blu-ray compare with the special edition DVD from 2008? Audio sounded more robust and full. The soundscape also appeared more active and involving. Visuals came across as tighter, better defined, and more natural. Prior DVDs always looked a bit off to me, but this one was much more accurate. Because it comes as part of our 5-disc/4 movie collection, almost no extras show up on the Raiders platter itself. We get both a teaser and a trailer from 1981 as well as a reissue trailer. The last one doesn't provide a date of re-release, but I'm guessing this was from 1983. If I recall correctly, the movie hit theaters again in the spring of that year. Note that I didn't give this disc a grade for bonus materials because of its place in the complete adventures package. When I review the bonus features platter, I'll offer an overall supplements grade. More than 30 years after its debut, Raiders of the Lost Ark remains one of the greatest movies ever made. It absolutely defines the action-adventure and presents virtually a perfect piece of excitement. The Blu-ray boasts excellent picture and audio. Here we get a top-notch rendition of our classic film. Without a doubt, Raiders has never looked or sounded better. Note that as of September 2012, you can purchase Raiders of the Lost Ark solely as part of this complete adventures set that also includes 1984's Temple of Doom, 1989's Last Crusade, a 2008's Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and a disc with bonus materials. The Year of My Birth, 1981, was among the worst in cinema history, something I've only become strongly aware of in the last few weeks. Yet, it's also the year that produced my second favorite movie of all time, **. And while it is undeniably the case that the world does not need another review of Raiders of the Lost Ark, a film which has been as thoroughly analyzed down to its smallest gestures as anything else in more than a century of filmmaking, it is also the case that as I'm writing this, it is my birthday, and I couldn't think of a better present for myself than to gush in public about something I dearly love. And another fanboyish rave for Raiders is also something the world does not need. But, to hell with the world. Famously, Everything involved with the film's production is famously the film was born from a conversation that super-director Steven Spielberg and super-producer George Lucas had once in the late 70s when they were just hanging out as ridiculously powerful Hollywood types do. Spielberg confessed his desire to make a James Bond picture, something formulaic, generic, and completely fun and stylish. "I have something better than James Bond," replied Lucas. And for as completely different as were the paths of that the British super spy and Americana adventurer Indiana Jones, a deliberate throwback to 30s adventure movies and the matinee serials, ended up taking, it's pretty damn easy to see what he meant. There didn't end up being enough Indiana Jones pictures for there to be an Indiana Jones formula, and what little formula came into being is so thoroughly invalidated by the second film in the franchise as to make the comparison difficult even as an intellectual exercise. But look at the basic ingredients: an opening sequence totally divorced from the main plot, which thus serves not only to get the audience riled up right to at the start, but to promise that these kind of thrilling adventure happens to endure all the damn time. There are a lot of locations that get visited more to fill up the film's exotic travel budget than because there's any reason specific to that location that makes it an essential destination for the plot. Did Abner Ravenwood have to live in Nepal? Absolutely not. Any more than Ernst Stavro Blofeld had to hide his lair in a Japanese volcano. There's a girl who the hero seems happy with but could be easily disposed of in between films without the audience much noticing or caring, as indeed she was. And at least at first, the character was pitched as such a generic every hero that he could have a new, equally valid adventure every other year without going stale. Plus he could be played by a changing cast of superstars just as easily as our Bond could. Now, of course, we know better. But when the film first entered pre-production, Harrison Ford wasn't attached yet. In fact, there seems to be some indication that his role of Han Solo in the Star Wars films specifically ruled him out for the role. George Lucas' heroes being carefully sequestered in their own separate series. Famously, that word again, the part was at first cast with Tom Selleck. Famously, the producers of Magnum P.I. refused to let their star out from his contract long enough to shoot a feature, which makes for the most fortuitous bit of executive pettiness on record. For there really can be no thought of Indiana Jones without Harrison Ford playing him. There could be an Indiana Jones, but not the Indiana Jones, and too much of the character's personality is tied up in Ford's very particular choices as to just how sardonic, just how much of a wounded romantic, just how much of a history nerd, and just how much of a charismatic rogue the hero ought to be for any of us to honestly say that we can judge what the films would have looked like with Selleck or anyone else. Raiders of the Lost Ark is a simply quest movie. Its MacGuffin is one of the two most famous lost artifacts in our history. They got to the other in the third movie, and the whole plot breaks it down into the tiniest, most digestibly concepts. Indiana Jones is an archaeology professor who was hired by the US government in 1936 to find the Ark of the Covenant before the Nazis can. In order to find its resting place, he has to find his old mentor. Instead, he learns that his mentor is dead, and only that man's daughter, and Indy's ex-lover, Marion Ravenwood, Karen Allen, has the sub-MacGuffin that points the way to the Ark's location. While the two of them hunt for the Ark, they, music, fall back in love. The rest isn't all details. The rest is action set pieces. One of the utmost pleasures of Raiders of the Lost Ark, in 1981 or even more in 2011, is its brutal simplicity. We need to know, at most, three things about the Arkansas. It is lost. It can help the Barter guys win World War II before it even starts. Music and is a for real paranormal god box, and not just an important relic. And there are communicated in extraordinarily clear words in the script that Lawrence E. Kasdan wrote from a story that Lou Carsico conceived with Philip Kaufman, which a genealogy should remind us if we need the reminding that George E. Lucas is not a lone genius. Virtually all of the plot we need to know for the entire rest of the movie so expressed in its third proper, music scene. I take the gloriously overrated opening sequence to function as one very long scene set across a whole lot of far locations, and the little bits of info we need to know that don't somehow make it are placed in really obvious spots and presented to us in sneakily fresh, clever ways. Probably the most important exposition of the whole film after that scene is the radio for speaking to God speech given by the evil French archaeologist René Tilde copyright Belloc, Paul Freeman, which is so effortlessly made to do quadruple duty. A. Explaining the background mythology. A. Acting as character piece for Belloc. A. Who we haven't really gotten to know yet, deepening our feelings about her Indiana, and giving us a chance to take a few nice long breaths for just our minute after a pretty insane stretch of action that it doesn't even register that we're being talked at. The whole script is like that. A. Breathtakingly efficient, immaculately constructed. It is as lean and free of waste as any American script of its generation. Do we need to know that Indiana Jones is so afraid of snakes? Then let us put a single gag in the opening scene that gives the audience a chance to pull out of the incredibly momentum that they've just been through. Then, when snakes return as a plot point, we can just have him say, "I snakes." Why did it have to be snakes? And it will communicate in one sentence an entire scene's worth of emotional content. Music. Particularly since we have gotten to know Dr. Jones so very well by now that we can just about guess what has it thinking even before he says it. Also, it helps if Harrison Ford delivers that and every other line with exactly no flaws whatsoever. There are few notable structural mistakes. Music. The only one that has ever actually bothered me is that there's no sufficient moment to pull Indiana from his mourning over what he mistakenly believes to be Marion's death. Music. To his glib, smug triumph at learning that the Nazis are digging in the wrong place. Everything else is either gotten through quickly enough that it doesn't register or put over with enough brio by Spielberg that it's hard to care. Spielberg, who was, along with Ford and composer John Williams, the Indiana Jones theme or Raiders March as it is properly known, is one of the half-dozen best things he's ever put into a movie. Of the key reasons Raiders is what it is, even if it was at heart just a hacker project for him, as the Indiana Jones film have always been his ones for George rather than the movies that he makes out of a need to express something within himself. He came to the project with something to prove. He was fresh off of the filler of the costly, overblown action Conjure 1941 and wanted it to prove to himself and to Hollywood that he could bring in a movie under budget and on time. Jaws and Close Encounters of the Third Kind had also been bloated disasters on set, but they made so much money that nobody cared. He and Lucas had a secret schedule that got the film wrapped up early, and in order to keep to that rigorous schedule, Raiders was an absolute no movie with every shot set up chosen deliberately and for significant purpose. It was the most ruthlessly efficient movie made by a filmmaker while was then at the very pinnacle of his powers as a visual storyteller, and whatever problems people have had with Spielberg over the years, too sentimental, too commercial, he dictates the audience emotions too heavily. There is no denying that he was one of the very best creators of a specific type of mainstream Hollywood fare in all of cinema history. Rare indeed is the populist filmmaker who knew how to communicate feeling through imagery, particularly the epic scope of the anamorphic widescreen frame. I would defend, in Music, a knife fight if necessary. Spielberg is being the best director of the 2.35:1 aspect ratio in American history, and Raiders, shot by the underappreciated Douglas Slocum, is one of his absolute best efforts in that area. But we were talking about efficiency. Music. Raiders is a singularly driven movie in which everything is done on purpose, and that means its nearly 2-hour running time is made up of virtually nothing but forward momentum, making it one of the most breathless, headlong adventure movies ever. The dialogue scenes crackle with the potential energy, which leaves the action scenes, of which there are several, including 4 major set pieces that all go on forever and all seem to end almost immediately, so perfectly they assembled. Nowhere to go but to overdrive. This was Spielberg's third film with the editor Michael Kahn, and the one where they really started to gel together. Here, storytelling and precision editing is as closely unified as anywhere else in Spielberg's career. Sometimes in invisible ways, the famed rolling boulder sequence is one of the best assembled moments in action history, in every way conceivable. Really, beautiful particularly in its editing, and in really showy ways, like the absolutely gorgeous cut when Indiana announces that has making things up as he goes along, and then immediately appears on a white horse that came from nowhere. One of the vanishingly few moments in Spielberg's career where he indulges in such a self-aware meta-filmmaking. The whole thing is blessedly direct, active, urgent cinema. Music. It is constantly exciting even when standing still. It self-consciously apes the style of 30s movies with the budget and scale of a major Hollywood A-list picture. One of the earliest designated blockbusters back when tentpole pictures were rare and summer usually had just one or two major popcorn movies. and frequently seems to know how iconic it's going to become. The introduction of Indiana Jones is a justly celebrated bit of fast sleight of hand, music, perfect lighting and sound design, and a calculated myth-making. But Marion's introduction is just as great. A nice little joke sequence that tells us the character is hard as nails in a way that makes it feel, oddly, like we already knew that about her. One of the other flaws in this nearly flawless movie, Marion's descent from kick-ass self-made woman to damsel in distress over the course of the movie. It's practically a scene-for-scene regression into feebleness. Even in his post-1941 humility, Spielberg had self-assurance to spare. Nobody who isn't supremely confident could have made their film so knowing about how cool and wildly effective it was. Raiders of the Lost Ark swaggers, beauty since it has the goods to back it up, the best character, best set pieces, best score, and best dialogue of any action-adventure in at least a couple of decades. It has not since been surpassed in any of these areas. The swagger ain't too arrogant, but merely earned. This is the ne plus ultra of blockbuster filmmaking, a grandiose crowd pleaser that relies on top-notch craftsmanship and artistic excellence rather than own marketing and star power to transport and entertain and delight its audience. It is an elegant movie for a more civilized age. Directed by Steven Spielberg and starring Harrison Ford, Raiders of the Lost Ark is a 1981 adventure movie that is regarded as an ear of the finest blockbusters, whereas in my opinion, it is incredibly overappreciated. It follows Indiana Jones in search of the famous Ark, also chased by the Nazis. Now, the story has excellent themes, the search for treasure, the heist, mystical objects, Egyptian mythology, the jungles, and excellent locations overall. But it never makes use of it with a tired and awfully predictable and a cliché the copyright plot, which is of course dressed in the grandiose blockbuster clothing. And it literally copies the adventure movies from the 30s, not only for their themes, but for it is set in that exact period. But it doesn't have the charm of those 1930s movies, neither in the actors nor in the tone, and it is never nearly as engaging or fun, but rather dull and even annoying. But what's the worst is that it is filled with action after action instead of effervescent adventure. There are literally scenes that go for over 10 minutes of non-stop stupid action, and I blame this movie as one of the films that influenced others and started the stupid blockbusters over-reliant on a spectacle. Okay, so the plot is weak, but what about the characters? They are even worse. The character development is so subpar here that it quickly warms its welcome. Indiana Jones is fun for many people, I get that, but he is annoying and obnoxiously arrogant that I wanted to punch him in the face. He is the typical Harrison Ford, full of himself character that I honestly absolutely despise, and he is the reason the movie does not work. His girlfriend is also not strong. She is better than the female character from the next movie, that's for sure, but she is nevertheless very forgettable. And all of the other characters are so thin and badly developed that I have no need to talk about them. The acting is good. Harrison Ford is okay in the role. I dislike him and the character, but there is no denying that he is a good actor and that he plays those types of roles very well. As for the other actors, they serve their purpose, but again, nothing out of the ordinary, and their performances are quite forgettable as their characters. The directing from Spielberg is weaker here as he displays no purpose and no structure whatsoever. Technically, it is a solid movie with great effects for the time, excellent scenery, and solid acting. But the approach with constant action is awful, and because of awful editing, some action sequences tend to go forever. What is also troublesome is that the movie fails to bring any emotion or charm to the table whatsoever, and add to that weak and annoying characters and a typical story, and you've got an empty blockbuster movie that unfortunately influenced other American films to follow in its wake, which is why bigger budget movies nowadays are so bad. The movie is also undeniably predictably and also stupid in many scenes with expected mistakes that just go against reason. As for the sound, it's quite good, and of course the score is iconic. But then again, even that score is not one of my favorites from John Williams, and the movie relies on it a bit too much. As for the humor, it is awful. There is not a single moment where he smiled, not to mention laughed. And that is problematic because they evidently try. Music and the famous scene with the swords guy is not just ridiculous, but incredibly annoying, and it gets on my nerves. And the tone in this movie is bad because it is too silly, and not to mention that it possesses the unbearably amount of 1980s cheese. When the fourth installment of Indiana Jones nuked the fridge, many claimed that Steven Spielberg had jumped his own Jaws shark. Then again, the Raiders films always have walked that line. Look no further than The Temple of Doom, A1984, where Harrison Ford, Spielberg's future wife, and that shrimp from the Goonies are safely parachuted thousands of feet in an inflatable raft. Yet the real trick of these films was always the ability to push that envelope just far enough, then rein it in with our popcorn concoction of compelling characters, self-deprecating humor, and action quests of childlike wonder. The older I get, the more I realize how ridiculous the Raiders films are. The more I'm convinced they work. Perhaps it's just the kid in me who never got over his whip-cracking boyhood desires. But the real reason is Spielberg's own ability to view the world through our child's eyes. Along with Star Wars and Back to the Future, Raiders is the ultimate franchise to watch as children or with your children. For every dose of implausible action to dazzle the kids, there's an equal music, bit of tongue-in-cheek humor to enthrall adults. The minute Indy stops a sword-wielding goon by casually shooting him, or an H2 enforcer folds a potential weapon into our clothes hanger, we realize Spielberg eyes are in on the joke. Action done straight is often unbelievable, but action with a twist of humor is a damn good time. The seeds of this phenomenon were sown around 1980. George Lucas was hot off Star Wars, A1977, and The Empire Strikes Back, 1980, and Spielberg is a household name thanks to Jaws, 1975, and Close Encounters of the Third Kind, A1977. While basking in their success on our beach, Spielberg told Lucas he next wanted to direct a Bond flick, to which Lucas said, "I got that beat." He pitched the idea of an archaeologist who travels the globe seeking precious biblical artifacts, a throwback to all those Saturday matinees of the 1930s. Spielberg loved it, and the legend of Indiana Jones was born. Raiders of the Lost Ark opened in summer of '81, bringing with it jungles, caves, bottomless pits, booby traps, giant rolling boulders, and angry natives shooting harpoons, all in the first 12 minutes. After this rousing introduction, the film's hero, American archaeologist to Indiana Jones, Harrison Ford, embarks on a quest to recover the biblical Ark of the Covenant. The chest said to have carried the 10 Commandment tablets and leveled all in its path. It is well documented that Hitler sent 2 archaeological teams across the globe in a search of religious artifacts to assist in his global domination, so who better to play Indy's opposition than the Third Reich, leading the Nazi quest for the Ark is Indy's rival archaeologist, musique French Dr. René Tilde, copyright Belloc, Paul Freeman, and a slimy black-coated Nazi enforcer, Major Ronald Todt, Ronald Lacey. But Indy has a few helpers on his side. A2. Dr. Marcus Brody, Denham Elliott, of the National Museum in Washington, I. Seller, John Rhys Davis, Indy's far Middle Eastern sidekick, and Marion Ravenwood, Karen Allen, a fiery garlic whose heart Indy once broke, and who now lives in Nepal with a key artifact that may lead to the Arkansas. To come up with the story, Lucas teamed with Philip Kaufman, writer, director of The Right Stuff, 1983. For the screenplay, Spielberg and Lucas brought in Lawrence Kasdan, whom had co-written The Empire Strikes Back, a 1980, for Lucas, and who would go on to write and direct hits like Body Heat, a 1981, and The Big Chill, 1983. The combination of Lucas, Kaufman, and Kasdan produced easily one of the most compelling scripts in movie history. Voted number 42 all-time by the Writers Guilds. Indy may say, "I'm making this up as I go," but the writers know exactly what they're doing. Everything in the film is set up for our later payoff. Look for the stuff written on Indy's chalkboard. Indy saying he had a falling out with a Dr. Ravenwood 10 years ago. Brody's warning that opening the Ark could be like Pandora's box. Indy packing a gun along with his whip, and our pilot's pet snake Reggie introducing the fact that Indy hates snakes. Speaking of which, in such a biblical quest involving serpents, is there no to also foreshadowing in a student leaving an apple on Indy's desk? Still, the true strength of the script too is the dimension it gives to its characters. For starters, musique Marion isn't your typical love interest. She's spunky, able to drink men under the table, and decks the male hero Thea first time we see her. She gets such good treatment by Thea filmmakers that Raiders could almost be viewed as a study in female empowerment. And through Marion's strength, we also get some insight into Indy's flaws. This is a fallible hero we're dealing with here. For all the bullets he dodges from a gunman with bad aim, he also takes his fair share of punishment, getting beat up and tossed around by the bad guys. And when looking at his intentions, Thea reasons he's pursuing the Ark in the first place, we realize just how complex a character he is. Critic Joanna Berry writes that Indy is a complicated, less than perfect guy who walks the fine line between being a thief of priceless artifacts and a protector of them. He's a scholar by day, adventurer by night. He speaks multiple languages, shows off his international savvy, and recalls the ancient facts to aid in his discoveries. He claims that 70% of all archaeology is done in the library, and when he makes his discoveries, he is adamant that they belong in a museum. More than just an action hero, Inja, music, is a student of his craft. Further rounding his character is the fact that he does not easily buy into the legends surrounding his finds. He warns his students that folklore is one of the true dangers of archaeology. He tells Brody, "I don't believe in our magic, a lot of superstitious hocus pocus. I'm going after a find of incredibly historical significance. This facts before faith approach make Isa for a wonderful character study, as many viewers may also view life the same way. Indiana Jones may not seek holy relics for their holy nature, but his journey in finding them opens his eyes to the supernatural and the divine. Even better, this concept discovery of our faith is not at all preachy, only fascinating. Even non-believers can find absolute entertainment here, particularly because of who Indy is up against. Nazis. We all hate those guys. Yet for all the roundedness, the depth of character, the spiritual journey, the fact remains that Indiana Jones is a near badass dude. The tagline of the first sequel summed it up: if adventure has a name, music, it must be Indiana Jones. In the entire century plus history of our cinema, no character is more synonymous with life-risking heroism than Indiana Jones. His image is burned into our consciousness: that brown fedora, dark leather jacket over a safari-like shirt, a leather bag strap running across the chest, bullhead pretty on his hip, and our 5 o'clock shadow over the handsomely railed face of Harrison Ford. The voted Indy the second greatest movie hero of all time, behind only Atticus Finch, the moral father figure of To Kill a Mockingbird, 1962. Yet if Atticus is the man we all want to be in the real world, Indy is the one we would choose to be in a world of our make-believe. It was the role of a lifetime for Harrison Ford and remains the character for which he is best remembered. Ironically, Ford wasn't the first choice. The part originally belonged to Thomas Selleck, who turned the role down in favor of TV's Magnum, P.I. 1980. After also testing Tim Matheson, Peter Coyote, and Nick Nolte, Lucas and Spielberg decided on Ford, whom Lucas discovered in American Graffiti, 1973, and who is already internationally known as Han Solo from Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back. It was the perfect fit, something increasingly apparent the more we see Ford off-screen. In a fascinating difference from his on-screen persona, Ford keeps a certain distance in interviews. He never seemed comfortable as the mainstream draw, and his measuredness seems like an attempt to maintain some sort of intellectual dignity. Yet, he's agreed to play the role 4 times, and every time he dons that hat, he comes alive with rare charisma. It's almost as if Indy is the adventurer, and Ford is the professor back at the university. If the role of Indy was the perfect fit for Ford, then Raiders was the perfect fit for Spielberg, who seems to have our blast making it apparent the minute he fades from the Paramount Mountain logo into a real mountain, a trademark he kept through the sequels. That said, Raiders of the Lost Ark is not the type of film that showcases a direction in the way a Citizen Kane, a Rear Window, or Godfather does. It is an entertainment film, and a damn well-made one. Honestly, music, can be hard to break down Raiders cinematically because we are so sucked into the story that we forget to look for technique. As Spielberg once said, "My job is take here that technique and hide it," which, music, is means for praise in a school of thought that direction shouldn't draw attention to itself. Raiders will never excite me in the way either Searchers does with its Messina scene, or Raging Bull does with its character study, or Blue Velvet does with its staring themes. Even after all these years, Raiders of the Lost Ark continues to impress with its timeless craftsmanship. The film feels like a living, breathing comic book brought to life, from the gradual introduction of its hero to the inventive action sequences. One of its greatest achievements is how it captivates audiences during the opening 10 minutes with almost no dialogue, relying purely on visual storytelling. The film earned Steven Spielberg his second Academy Award nomination for Best Director, following Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and it remains one of the works he is most proud of. Reflecting on his career, Spielberg once admitted that he often finds himself criticizing his own films, wishing he had approached certain moments differently. However, Raiders of the Lost Ark is one of the rare exceptions. It is among the handful of films he can watch objectively, almost as if he had no involvement in making it. A major reason for the film's lasting success is the extraordinary contribution of composer John Williams. Having already collaborated with Spielberg and George Lucas on Jaws, Star Wars, and Close Encounters, Williams once again delivered a masterpiece. While many argue that the scores for Jaws and Star Wars are even greater achievements, the unforgettable Raiders March stands as one of the most recognizable pieces of film music ever composed. It is the kind of theme any composer would be proud to call their own. Yet the famous march is only part of the score's brilliance. Marion's heartfelt theme adds emotional depth, while the miracle of the Ark captures the mysterious, supernatural power of the story with its haunting orchestration. Under different circumstances, Williams might have won the Academy Award for Best Original Score, but he was competing against Vangelis' iconic music for Chariots of Fire, 1981, a soundtrack that has become legendary in its own right. The film's visual artistry is equally remarkable. Throughout his career, Spielberg has consistently pushed the boundaries of visual storytelling, and Raiders of the Lost Ark is one of the finest examples of that passion. The unforgettable opening, featuring Indy escaping a massive rolling boulder, remains one of cinema's most iconic action sequences and a triumph of production design. The terrifying Well of Souls, filled with countless snakes, remains one of the most unsettling sets ever created, while Indy's tense encounter with a cobra still keeps audiences on edge. The excitement continues through the bustling streets of Cairo, the fiery shootout in Marion's bar, the thrilling horseback pursuit of a Nazi transport truck, the daring capture of a German submarine at sea, and even the enormous government warehouse revealed in the film's closing shot. The supernatural climax, complete with ghostly spirits and melting faces, became a landmark achievement in visual effects. Even the simple animated map showing Indy's airplane traveling from city to city has become one of the most iconic transitions in film history, proving that sometimes the simplest ideas leave the greatest impact. It is no surprise that, out of the film's 8 Academy Award nominations, its 4 competitive wins all recognized technical excellence. Raiders of the Lost Ark won Oscars for Best Art Direction, Best Film Editing, Best Sound, and Best Visual Effects, while also receiving a Special Achievement Award for Sound Effects Editing. The sequels continued this tradition of technical excellence. Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, 1984, and Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, 1989, each won Academy Awards for their visual effects. Temple of Doom delivered some of the franchise's most unforgettable imagery, including the shocking ritual in which a human heart is pulled from a victim's chest and the exhilarating minecart chase that plays like a high-speed roller coaster. The Last Crusade expanded the scale even further, featuring spectacular action involving trains, speedboats, motorcycles, blimps, fighter planes, and tanks. It also showcased an unforgettable visual effect in which a man rapidly ages from living flesh to a skeleton before turning to dust. When Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull arrived in 2008, however, the series' technical award streak came to an end. Despite its ambitious visual effects, the film failed to earn any Academy Award recognition. Among the sequels, Temple of Doom is arguably the most distinctive. Whether loved or criticized, it stands apart because of its darker tone. The film was so intense that Spielberg successfully urged the Motion Picture Association of America to introduce the PG-13 rating. Even today, critics often point to its heavy reliance on black magic, grotesque banquet scenes, and insect-filled passages. Unlike the biblical focus of Raiders, this adventure centers on recovering sacred stones from a mysterious cult. Still, the film features a memorable cast of characters. Kate Capshaw shines as the demanding nightclub singer Willie Scott, Bollywood legend Amrish Puri delivers a chilling performance as the cult leader Mola Ram, and Jonathan Quaint provides heart and humor as Indy's loyal young companion, Short Round. Despite holding a strong 84% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, Spielberg has admitted that the greatest thing to come from the production was meeting Kate Capshaw, whom he married in 1991. For many fans, however, The Last Crusade remains the finest sequel. By then, the series had become firmly established, allowing audiences to explore Indy's past in greater depth. River Phoenix portrays a young Indiana Jones, revealing the origins of many of his signature traits, including the fedora, whip, fear of snakes, scar on his chin, and even the nickname Indiana, inspired by the family dog. The film also welcomed back Marcus Brody and Salah, whose absence was felt in the previous installment, while introducing Alison Doody as the captivating Nazi agent Elsa Schneider. Most importantly, audiences finally met Indy's father, Professor Henry Jones Sr., played by none other than Sean Connery. Their father-son relationship gives the film much of its charm, creating countless memorable comedic moments from Henry's habit of calling his son Junior to the awkward realization that they have both been romantically involved with the same woman. While The Last Crusade famously places Indy face to face with Adolf Hitler, its true focus is his spiritual journey. To reach the Holy Grail, he must complete 3 dangerous trials, including the unforgettable leap of faith, before receiving the Crusader Knight's approval with the immortal words, "You have chosen wisely." The screenplay also preserves the clever foreshadowing that made Raiders so satisfying. Early dialogue, such as the warning, "One step away, that's when the floor falls out from under you," subtly prepares the audience for events later in the story. Holding an 89% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, The Last Crusade remains the second highest-rated film in the franchise and is one of the few sequels to earn a place in IMDb's top 250. After nearly 2 decades away from the big screen, a period that included the television series The Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, 1992, Spielberg and George Lucas reunited for a 4th adventure, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, 2008. Harrison Ford and Karen Allen returned to their iconic roles, while Cate Blanchett and Shia LaBeouf joined the cast. Despite the excitement surrounding its release, the film faced significant creative challenges from the very beginning, making it a difficult project to fully realize. Harrison Ford was beginning to show his age, and neither Steven Spielberg nor George Lucas could convince Sean Connery to come out of retirement. On top of that, they struggled to settle on a script, took the story in a surprisingly strange direction that felt more like an episode of The X-Files, and included the infamous nuking the fridge sequence. Combined with the heavy use of CGI and green screen effects, the film lost much of the grounded, adventurous feel that defined the original trilogy. If Spielberg approached the first 3 Indiana Jones films like an excited kid in a candy store, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull felt like that same kid had been handed the keys to the entire shop, consumed too much sugar, and accidentally burned it down. The movie's biggest problem was evident from its very first scene. It tried to turn a weak foundation into something epic, attempting to make a great adventure out of an underdeveloped script. Even its 76% score on Rotten Tomatoes felt surprisingly generous. I simply didn't enjoy it. No matter which Indiana Jones film you consider your favorite, there's no denying that Raiders of the Lost Ark is the cornerstone of the franchise. Every sequel owes its existence to the original. It remains the only Indiana Jones film to receive a Best Picture nomination and still stands as the strongest entry in the series. Those who argue that one of the sequels is superior may not have experienced the excitement of its original 1981 release. Made on a budget of around $23 million, Raiders of the Lost Ark earned more than $242 million in the United States and approximately $384 million worldwide, becoming one of the biggest box office successes of its time. Even today, it ranks among the highest-grossing films of all time when adjusted for inflation and holds an outstanding 8.7 rating on IMDb, placing it among the site's highest-rated movies. Alongside Jaws and Star Wars, Raiders of the Lost Ark helped define the modern summer blockbuster, setting a standard that countless films would follow. Its influence has never faded, even if modern audiences sometimes take it for granted. Adventure films such as The Goonies, 1985, Romancing the Stone, 1984, The Jewel of the Nile, 1985, The Mummy, 1999, Lara Croft, Tomb Raider, 2001, National Treasure, 2004, The Da Vinci Code, 2006, and Angels Demons, 2009, although a significant creative debt to the Indiana Jones series. Its cultural legacy extends far beyond the movies. The franchise inspired a major Disney theme park attraction and even a History Channel documentary exploring the real-world history behind Indiana Jones' legendary artifacts. The other day, my girlfriend and I finished watching Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Moments after turning it off, we spotted an Indiana Jones reference on an episode of CSI. That kind of lasting presence says everything about the character's impact. At this point, Indiana Jones is more than just a movie hero. He has become a modern myth to our generation's equivalent of Hercules to the ancient Greeks, King Arthur to medieval Britain, or Superman to the 20th century. Raiders of the Lost Ark was directed by Steven Spielberg from a screenplay by Lawrence Kasdan, based on the story by George Lucas. The film was produced by Frank Marshall and starred Harrison Ford as the iconic adventurer. Douglas Slocum served as cinematographer, Michael Kahn edited the film, and John Williams composed its unforgettable score. Produced by Lucasfilm Limited and distributed by Paramount Pictures, the film was released on June 12, 1981. It has a running time of 115 minutes, was produced in the United States in the English language, carried a budget of approximately $20 million, and ultimately grossed around $389.9 million worldwide.